Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm so pleased you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about conflict between needs and wants. And the idea for this topic today came from the book, The Gap versus the Gain, which was written by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Really interesting story. Dan Sullivan is a very well-known business coach and entrepreneurial coach. Didn't write a word of the book. It's written by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who is a psychologist, PhD. Really interesting collaborations that I don't quite understand, but here we are. The reason why I want to talk about this is that our struggle between needs and wants really needs to be well understood in terms of what our trained, experienced brains think is important. So many of the physicians that I talk with struggle with some of our common tasks, dealing with our inbox, which is full of messages and results that need to be dealt with, dealing with our notes that have to be completed every time we see a patient, right? These standard things that are often just a really unpleasant piece of work for us because they don't feel like they're part of the care that we provide people. And we could have arguments about whether or not that's true, but today I really want to focus on what comes up when we try to do work that decreases the amount of time we're spending on those tasks and where we come into conflict with, actually getting some results done there. And I want to point out that our brains in particular are very highly tuned towards external drivers. When we went to medical school, when we had the idea to go to medical school, what did we need to do? We certainly needed a college degree, but we needed so much more than that, right? We needed to have excellent grades. We needed to have scores on MCATs. We needed to have letters of recommendation. We often needed to do volunteer work. If you've ever sat on a residency selection committee, you know too that the medical students coming in who are applying for residencies seem to have ever blossoming accomplishments that you just can't even comprehend. Like they've started some small business in Guatemala, taking care of refugee goats. Just all kinds of crazy, amazing things. We needed to participate in that system in order to get into medical school, in order to get into residency. And then, of course, we're very highly attuned to the medical needs. Like, what are the actual needs that our patients have to have compared to what they want? This context is really important to understand when we are working on something that primarily benefits us, although there's absolute ripple effects, which we can talk about, such as spending less time writing notes. Because we are so used to playing in this system where external drivers dictated that certain needs be met, right? Again, the list of things that you needed to do to get into medical school, the list of things that you needed to do to get into residency, the tasks that you had to complete during residency, all of our training really leads us to be very focused on what are the requirements, what are the lists, what are the tasks that I have to do. As we become attendings, right, there are other tasks that we have to do. We do have to write a note every time we see a patient and close that note, right, and drop a bill. We do need to answer the messages that are sent to us. There are things that we need to do, and we are really good at making sure the things that need to get done get done. If your pay is dependent on getting notes done and dropping a bill, you are probably better at actually doing that compared to if you are paid on a salary. If you were told that your patient couldn't pick up their medicine at the pharmacy unless you finished your note, I bet you your note would be done differently than the way that you're doing, right? We look at those things very differently. So if that's the context, then I want you to appreciate that things like finishing your note and finishing your note times whatever number of patients you see per day, you have a desire, you have a want, you have an internal motivation to make that easier, to make it faster, to make it simpler in some way. But that want, that desire is competing directly against your need to meet other people's needs, which you are very highly trained to do. From the perspective of your brain at its most simple level, you're meeting all the marks. You are getting your notes done. You are surviving. You are maintaining your job. You are taking care of other humans, right? And of course, the tasks, the way that you prioritize the tasks probably depends on which has the most direct impact on your patients, right? Because again, we're highly attuned to the needs of others, and we are conditioned to meet those needs above our own needs, right? Taking care of our own bodies, and certainly above our wants, our desire for more time for rest or sleep, or to be doing anything except spending a lot of time closing notes. Our brain does not think that the goal of closing notes more quickly outweighs what's going on right now. From your brain's perspective, you are meeting the needs, and you are not used to listening to your wants in place of your needs. You are used to prioritizing needs, and probably not your own, which we've talked about. So I want us to appreciate this context because when people are looking for help in terms of getting their notes done more quickly, there are several places where they commonly look, right? If you work on Epic, right, we all know that we have Epic chair sides or these Epic efficiency classes that we can take. There are coaches who do work specifically on helping physicians to get their notes done more quickly, right? There are lectures that you can go to. There are professional groups that talk about it. There are lots of resources that are out there talking about the nuts and bolts of getting your note done more quickly. There are live human scribes and AI scribes. There are lots of tools out there. And we also have our own brain that is struggling to think that the want of getting our note done more quickly could in any way supersede the needs of moving along, seeing the patients, cramming more patients in if you get double and triple booked, right? We prioritize those things. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but again, we need to look at the context as we are trying to do this work, because in order to get your notes done more quickly, or in order to do something that's really important to yourself, you're going to need to change the way that you perceive the needs versus wants, because the needs that will be in front of you, the needs that will be available to you as a high achieving, highly qualified, empathetic physician, the needs are always going to be there. And they're always going to outweigh unless you choose to start tapping into the wants or taking care of your own physical needs or emotional needs, right? Which, again, we've talked about many times on the program. So, how do we do this? What are the actual steps? So, I want to propose 3 steps that you can start to do in order to make some progress in down regulating what you believe are the most important needs and dipping into those things that we want. And again, for the context of today, we're thinking about the want of trying to get notes done more quickly or getting through our inbox more quickly, right? Trying to free up some time. If you want to expand, if you've already done some great work on this area, think about other things that you want for yourself. I know many physicians who would love to go into business for themselves. They would love to open a practice. They would love to have the autonomy of taking care of patients in the way that they want. And yet, the struggle of, yes, and that's going to mean that I leave, this chunk of patients that I see as an employed physician over here. It's going to require that we dive into our desire and we put our desire to serve people differently over the needs of the people that we currently serve. It's hard work. It sounds so simple, right? But this really dips deep into some of those emotional morasses, if you will, of thinking, oh, I'm hurting people. I'm hurting people by leaving them, as opposed to thinking of how might I serve a different group of people in a different way, in a way that works for me over here, right? That is still a want compared to, quote unquote, the need to stay put and keep doing what you're doing. So if we think about this in the context of getting our notes done more quickly, step one is really connecting the value to your goal. So if the goal is the simple, I want to get my notes done before the end of the clinic day. I want to leave clinic or leave the hospital with all of my notes complete. First, we need to ask ourselves, why do you want that? I'm not being facetious here. Why do you want that? And I want you to think about all of the potential reasons why you want your notes to be done. And keep writing. Challenge yourself to write out 20 reasons. This will, again, seem very easy to do, but it's going to require that you really, really understand the why. So let's just come up with a short list of things that you might say are, part of the value of getting your notes done before the end of the day. So you may say that I'm tired of having this backlog that just feels like this huge weight on my shoulder. You might say, I'm tired of having all these mental tabs open because by the end of the day, I'm carrying around all of the patients I've seen and all the little details that did not yet get written down that part of me feels has to be written down. Again, we're not going to dive into the how much needs to be in your note. Let's just keep it simple here, right? But you have all these mental tabs open that you're carrying around with you. We could say, it's important to me to get the information down accurately. And you are going to be actually more accurate in the moment if you get that note done when you see that patient, right? Because they are fresh in your brain. You could say, it's important to me to get that note done because then the bill goes out on time, right? Especially if you're paid on productivity, it matters. If you're paid on salary, it probably doesn't matter to you because you don't see the directness of that. Although sometimes, right, we get held up and we say our pay is going to be held until we get that backlog down. So depends on whether or not that's a motivator for you. You might say, I want to go home and be present with the people who are at home waiting for me. Or I've got something to do in the evening that's important to me, and I want to mentally be there for it. I want to be present for it. You might say, I'm tired of being up until 3 a.m. every night, finishing my notes and then getting a few hours of sleep and going back at it again. Connect all of the values. You might say, I'm tired of not exercising because I'm spending too much time doing this. All of those reasons, I want you to list them out, and I want you to be really clear on what is the value of you meeting the goal. And again, we are really diving into this goal that we want, even though we acknowledge that, probably nothing needs to change in terms of your brain. Your brain knows that you're alive. Your brain doesn't really care if you're miserable, if you're exhausted, if you're overwhelmed. At its most simple level, it just wants survival. And if you are a physician, I'm just going to throw it out there that you probably have a safe place to live. You probably have easy access to food, right? You probably are dwelling in relative financial security enough that you're not worrying about your next paycheck and being able to afford rent. Like, yes, we've all got our own situations, but you're probably not struggling at that very basic level with survival. You're well above that, and your brain knows that, and it doesn't care if you're miserable because you've got this chronic backlog of open notes. Let's acknowledge that, and let's go really deep on why do I want to make a change, and let's connect that to the goal. Okay. So, next, what are the deep beliefs that you have about what is needed when it comes to your charts and, let's just say, your flow with patients? It's also really important that we understand what is getting in the way when we are trying to make progress on something that we want. A lot can go in here. What is the belief that you have about your notes as they are now, about what is necessary in a note, about what is okay or not okay in terms of charting in the room or keeping people waiting or anything connected with the flow? Again, let's write it out. Let's make up a list and keep going until your brain is really, truly empty. What are the beliefs and how do they get in the way? When you think about wanting to get your note done more quickly, but you realize that you're struggling because you always had the best examples of notes amongst your residency crew, right? You were always held up as someone who wrote these beautiful, thorough, complex notes that were 100% defensible. Recently, a client shared that her notes are still always given as examples to JACO when JACO comes around and is doing an evaluation of the quality of care. Her notes are always held up in front of them and in front of others as the example of what is being done. And that cements in her brain that her notes have to be that level of quality all day, all the time. And yet, when we are doing that, if we have 20, 30 notes to do a day, whatever that number is for you, you are going to drown because that's simply undoable. And so we need to really understand what is getting in the way. What are all the things? And there might be some external things on the list, right? That you have a really clunky EMR, that I don't know, the patients are very complex or, speak a different language. There may be some of those elements that are in there, but I really want you to focus most of your attention on the beliefs that you have about what is necessary, and throw in the fears too. Perhaps you believe that if your note has any typos or mistakes in it, that you're going to be sued. Perhaps you believe that your note is the way that you convey the quality of your care 100% of the time. You believe that patients won't respect you or colleagues or staff won't respect you if your notes are not pristine and beautiful. That sounds a little silly, but many of us are used to having been praised for writing really excellent notes. And we internalize the praise as that's a sign, especially if you spend a long time on it, that's a sign that I need to spend this much time and produce this quality of note every single time. And that may not be feasible for your setting. What are the beliefs? What are the things that are getting in the way when you've tried to make progress? Be really clear on what's coming up so that you can start to understand where you are and you can be tracking your progress as you go. The third thing I want you to do is to look at these two lists to recognize that you are someone who is very tuned into the needs of the setting that you work in, right? Whether that's hospital or clinic or some other setting, the needs of the patients or the clients that you serve, the needs of the staff and colleagues, and understanding how great a job you've been doing in attuning to those needs, probably ignoring your own needs, and contrasting that with what you are wanting. Looking at these two things together and really understanding why you're here will help you to be able to start to make baby steps towards what it is that you want. I would love for there to be just a switch we can flip, and all of a sudden you are suddenly closing all your notes and it's magic and it never goes back the other way. And I've absolutely seen some people who something clicks in their brain, they make a decision, and from that decision, they're able to just start doing it. Now, most of those people will have some backsliding that happens at some point, right? Because at some point, something falls out of alignment. That's okay. Nothing has gone wrong. I know people who are excellent charting coaches, and they run into the same dilemma. Things happen, and the gravitational pull of what you have known before will come roaring back. That's okay. Nothing has gone wrong. We just need to reset in our values, right? Reset in the things that we want. So don't take that as a sign of failure. Take that as a sign of, hey, I have a normal human brain. But reconciling this list and looking to see what are the values, what are the things that I really want? Why do I want them? Why are those things important to me? And comparing that with where are all these things that are getting in the way. If I can understand those two things and hold both of them in my brain, then I can decide on at least one small step that I'm going to take in order to make some progress towards what I want. I don't have to think that I'm magically going to do it all, but I want to make one small step at least towards the goal and then celebrate when I get there. So a really good question to ask ourselves there is, I will know that I'm being successful when, and then fill in the blank. I will know I'm being successful when I make the decision that I'm going to take 2 minutes and finish the note before I move on to the next person. I will be successful when I acknowledge that I don't have an answer for what is going on with this patient, but I'm going to write down my best ideas right now and what I'm going to be doing. So the undifferentiated abdominal pain, right, that comes in. As an outpatient clinic, I don't know the answer most of the time, right? But what I'm going to write down is these are the symptoms. This is the differential. These are the next steps, right? We're going to order some labs. We're going to do some imaging, whatever those things are. And I've given the patient this information of like, if X, Y, or Z thing happens, right? If they have fevers and vomiting, they need to go to the ER, right? I don't have to know what that abdominal pain is, and I don't have to write an elaborate essay, right? I've got some key things that I need to write down, and that's where we've left the visit anyway. I'm going to write those things down. I'm going to close that note, close that mental tab, and move on. I will know I'm being successful when I realize that my current plan is good enough. I've documented it. I'm done. I'm moving on. Allowing ourselves to make progress on a step, to understand when we've made that progress and how often we've made that progress, is how we actually implement change most of the time. Again, there's a few people out there who will have that magic switch flip in their brain and magically things are all falling into place. But for most of us, it is going to be small, steady progress and acknowledging where we are. The whole premise of the book, The Gap versus the Gain, is really to be noticing the progress that you've made, to feel confident and to celebrate that progress, right? To really feel like, yes, I've been able to, move forward on my goal, rather than to notice that you're very far away from, from whatever the ideal is, right? That's the gap part of knowing where am I and where is the ideal, and only seeing where you're not meeting the mark. You can read the whole book and get more out of it, certainly. But I really want to connect us to noticing that there is a difference between what we want, right, which is to spend less time on our notes and these administrative tasks that we have to do, and to realize what's getting in the way of making progress, right? Those needs that we're responding to, and to recognize that we are very used to responding to external drivers, right? Needs, and not so good at responding to internal drivers, which is the things that we want for ourselves. I want more time with my family. I want to leave at the end of the day knowing that I've closed everything, right? That my mental tabs are closed, that I'm ready for tomorrow, that I've got a relatively blank slate, that I've completed today's work today, that I did it good enough. I can always go back and amend something if some brilliant flash comes to me. But most of the time, we aren't going to have those brilliant flashes, and we're not going to be helping anyone or anything by writing these elaborate notes after reviewing for hours on UpToDate. Don't do that. That's not what we do most of the time, right? Most of us are not needing to do that. Let's recognize what we want, be very clear about what it is that we want, and to sit in the value of that. What does it gain us to meet this goal? To understand what's been getting in the way. What do I believe? Can I question that belief? Is it really necessary? Is it really necessary that my notes are the gold standard? And to think that I've only been successful when I have written these very elaborate notes that take me just too long, too long. It's not necessary. And working on making small steps towards progress. Now, just imagine what you can accomplish when you understand what it is that you want, what it is that you're going for, what's getting in the way, and you start to make progress on it. You start to do the work. You will get your notes done faster. You will start asking yourself that question, what is it that I want here, in more places? You will start asking yourself, what's getting in the way? Where am I getting stuck? What am I believing is true here? This is such good work to do. My friends, that's what I'm leaving you with for today. Thank you as always for listening. And thank you too for the people who reached out. I realized that I was having some kind of an issue with my mic. I think I had switched over my computer, and I thought that the mic in the computer was working well enough, but it sounds like it was not. The volume was too low. So I'm hoping that this is better and working well. And thank you to those of you who reached out. If you like what you hear in the podcast, please do me a favor, leave a rating and review. That helps other people to be able to find the podcast, and share it with a friend. All right, my friends, until next week. Bye-bye. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.